Hey, Cookies here. This is a quick start Mythic Plus guide for Holy Paladin. Jumping right into the talents, you're going to have two main talent builds that I'm going to show for the TLDR version of the talents. You're going to have Venthyr talents and Kyrian talents. There are other covenants that are playable, so don't freak out yet. These are just the main talents that differentiate between those two covenants. And then we'll talk about the other talents afterwards. So this is going to be the typical Venthyr setup right here that you see on screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to the typical setup that you'll see for Kyrian. Will be something like this. You just switch to Seraphim and Glimmer of Light. Cool. So those are the TLDR builds. Now we'll go ahead and talk about the talents individually. So the first row, Crusader's Might. This can be good if you have enough mana, which now everyone's taking and killing it. So this might actually be the best talent for increasing your damage and stuff. But typically you see a lot of Light's Hammer because it doesn't cost very much mana, and it also gives you the most damage for the value. Like, it gives you the most amount of damage in a single global, and it's on a minute cooldown, so it lines up really well with things like Wings and other abilities like that, and if you're running Seraphim, then even more so. Bestow Faith can also, this is like the best healing talent to take, so if you feel like you need extra healing in your Mythic Plus runs, then Bestow Faith is a solid option. And again, when talking about these talents, Covenant doesn't matter too much, but it does vary Covenant to Covenant. Basically, I think the easiest way to break it down is Kyrian requires less healing focused talents, and Venthyr requires more healing focused talents like cooldowns and stuff like that to get them through and help them heal as much as possible. Okay, so the 25 talent row. Judgment of Light is typically the go-to. This is just a free passive heal, so that's why people take it a lot. Saved by the Light is also completely viable if you're running either Beacon of Faith or Beacon of Virtue. This talent's a very, very solid option. Gives a lot of extra survivability to whoever your Beacon targets are, and if you have Beacon of Virtue, it can apply to everybody in the party while they have Beacon of Virtue active, so it's a very, very potent heal, and Absorb that it can apply to everybody if like the group's taking heavy AoE damage from a boss mechanic or something like that. And then Holy Prism, not too much of a fan. You could take it if you want to do like a tiny bit of extra damage, but the amount of healing that you're losing from Holy Prism is generally why people don't take it. And even then, it's like such a low damage ability that it's not usually worth pressing. Next up, we have the 30 talent row. I always take Blinding Light unless I am in a dungeon with a lot of undead, so Theater of Pain, Necrotic Wake, and Plaguefall. I will take Repentance because it's an extra CC against those types of mobs. But otherwise, Blinding Light is a very solid option just for extra crowd control. You shouldn't really ever take Fist of Justice because you're just losing a button by taking this. It just reduces the cooldown of Hodge, which can be useful, but you could also just have Hodge and another form of crowd control. In the 35 talent row, Unbreakable Spirit's the go-to because it just, because the dungeon is so long, like 30-40 minutes and something like that, reducing the cooldown of things like Bubble, Divine Protection, and Lay on Hands, you will actually get extra uses out of it just by taking this talent. Cavalier can be nice if you're just wanting to speedrun and you don't feel like you need any added benefits, and Rule of Law doesn't really have much of a use unless you really feel like you're getting outranged a lot, or you're running like a triple range comp or something and you feel like you can't heal anybody properly. But otherwise, Unbreakable Spirit is the clear choice here. In the 40 row, this is where things start getting interesting as we move down the list. So the 40 row, you can take any of these talents, so I'm going to explain the benefits of each. Divine Purpose gives you a solid base for damage and healing. And it's in the form of a passive, so it will just happen naturally as you're running the dungeon, and it's always active. It's not something that you have to rely on. It's just something that will always be present in your toolkit, which is really nice because it just gives you this solid foundation to work off of when you don't have cooldowns up or things like Wings and stuff. Holy Avenger gives you a very, very potent 3-minute cooldown that could be used for damage or healing. So if you want to do a lot of burst damage to bosses on like Tyrannical, Holy Avenger is great. If you want another button that does a lot of healing to get you through boss fights or certain abilities from, big trash pulls or something like that, Holy Avenger is the go-to. It just gives you another really big, powerful button to press, just like Wings. So you can use it when your Wings is down, or like I said, if you want to use it for damage, you can press Wings and Holy Avenger and just put a ton of damage into the boss. Seraphim is a little bit of both. It's typically seen as the damage talent but it's not necessarily that. I would say Holy Avenger is more of a damage talent, if anything, if you really want to go for pure damage. But Seraphim is a very like aggressive talent to take because it's something that you have to dump holy power into, unlike these other two abilities, or other two talents, I should say. So you have to be able to play into it and be willing to sacrifice things in order to get benefit from it. It is a solid all-around talent, and if you just go off of like overall damage, yes, Seraphim will do the most overall damage across the dungeon because you get to activate it every single pull, and it will buff all your abilities and all that stuff. So Seraphim is almost always taken for Kyrian, and that's because it lines up perfectly with your Divine Toll. So you can press it every time you press Divine Toll. And the only thing I would mention is if you do take Seraphim, try to always line it up as well with Light's Hammer, because it's a very potent combo to throw down Light's Hammer and press Seraphim. It just gives you a nice base of healing and damage output from the Light's Hammer. It almost like doubles the value of Light's Hammer. Not exactly, but you get a lot of extra benefit from it. So for that row, just to have clarification, if you don't really know what to take or you haven't played around with these talents, which is what I recommend, just go in there and try each of the talents and see which one you like the best. But if you don't want to make that choice, just take Divine Purpose. It's the clear choice for just, I don't want to worry about anything. I just want to have extra healing and damage where, just throughout the whole dungeon. In the 45 row, Awakening is the very obvious choice because having the ability to proc wings, especially when you take a talent like Divine Purpose that gives you even more chances to proc wings, it is very, very, very powerful. Other than this, Avenging Crusader I don't think has seen any play this entire expansion. It's very lackluster because it, again, doesn't give you anything extra. It just changes how your wings work. And then Sanctified Wrath, similar situation. It just makes your wings more powerful. So if you want, like how I said, you could take Holy Avenger for like a really intense like boss damage build. You could do that with Sanctified Wrath too. You could take Sanctified Wrath and Holy Avenger and just like do a ton of opening damage to the boss, but then you just have to be aware that you just used everything you have and now you have like nothing for the next 2 minutes because when you take Sanctified Wrath, you're putting everything into that 2-minute cooldown of wings, and outside of that, you have nothing else helping you, where Awakening helps you outside of that 2-minute window to get more wings and like protect your group while your abilities are on cooldown, because Holy Paladin is a very cooldown centric class. And then for the last row, Glimmer of Light is best for Kyrian because it provides a solid base for how many Holy Shocks you're pressing, especially with your Divine Toll. It can be taken with Venthyr as well, but it is going to hurt how much healing you can do to the group, so you need to be very aware of that. Beacon of Faith provides you with a nice kind of benefit to your healing, again, outside of your wings. It really helps you triage heal and keep the group alive when multiple people are taking damage rather than just one person. So Beacon of Faith is very good for that. And then Beacon of Virtue, similarly so. It really helps with like burst AoE healing, which is something that Paladins lack a lot. But sometimes it depends on playstyle, like how you like to play Paladin. But typically, Paladin is still really good at healing the group. It's just in a different way, which is triage healing. It's healing one person up at a time. But if you don't like that playstyle of like, hey, I'm going to heal you to full health, and now I'm going to work on you, and now I'm going to heal you to full health. If you don't like that idea and you just want to press a button that helps you get everybody topped off so you don't have to be panicking or worried about that playstyle of like, who do I pick to heal, then Beacon of Virtue is a solid option to allow you to kind of get more freedom and not have to worry about those choices so much. Cool. So that is all the talents. Next up, we're going to talk about Covenants and Legendaries. So for Covenant, you can really, with double Legendary coming out tomorrow, or tomorrow when this video is released, you can play any Covenant. The Covenants are all very, very solid options for Holy Paladin with double Legendary. If you want to min-max and play the best, I'm pretty sure at the moment that I would say that Venthyr is still going to be the best, and that's just because even with the Ashen Hollow nerfs, it's still going to be the best damage ability against bosses. It's just flat out, it's just that way. That's just how it works. So you can play Venthyr, you can play Kyrian, you can play Necrolord, you can play Night Fae. What are the benefits of each? Venthyr provides you with a huge, huge cooldown. The absolute, like, craziest cooldown in the game still, even after being nerfed multiple times this patch. Kyrian provides you with amazing healing output and really good overall damage. Kyrians can probably do the most overall damage across the board throughout all the Holy Paladin Covenants. Necrolord, similarly so. It has a good amount of like uptime on wings and works really well with the tier set that we have. So an M+, it's just going to give you a lot more uptime and overall damage and healing throughput. And then Night Fae has unique synergy in that you can buff another player in your party. So if you're running with someone who's like playing a very bursty DPS class, like I would say the best example is a Fire Mage. Night Fae is a really cool option to work with them. But in pugs and stuff, I would definitely not recommend playing Night Fae. But it is viable. If you like the playstyle or you like the idea of Night Fae, it is totally good with the double legendary. As far as the other legendary that you run outside of your Covenant legendary, the two main options are going to be Mad Paragon and Shock Barrier. You take Mad Paragon if you want more damage, or if you're Venthyr, because this is just the only one you ever want to run if you're Venthyr, typically, and you take Shock Barrier if you need extra healing. You can still take this as a Venthyr, it's just that you lose a lot of value when not taking Mad Paragon, because of the way that it interacts with Ashen Hollow. Yeah, those are your two options. There are other legendaries that are viable, like Relentless Inquisitor sees some play, and there's also one other legendary that sees a little bit of play, which I believe is, I think it's like a Prot Paladin legendary. Let me find it. I don't want to stall too much on this. Here it is. It's Vanguard's Momentum. It's a Retribution legendary that also sees some decent amount of play as well for damage, but to keep it simple, Shock Barrier or Mad Paragon, those are your two options for either damage or more healing. Cool. So let's talk about stat priorities. So for stats, you have, again, like every healer, equip item level. Don't worry too much about stats, but if you do want to be concerned with stats, here's a quick rundown of like what each of them benefit you with. So crit is going to be a pretty mediocre stat overall, I would say, for Holy Paladin. It doesn't provide you with too much because we're not using Infusion of Light procs very often, if ever. So that's the main value of crit, is like giving you more value to your Infusion of Light and your Holy Shock critting and stuff like that. Versatility is going to give you a very high amount of damage output and not very much healing output, but it's also going to give you survivability, so that's a plus. And then you have Mastery, which gives you no damage output whatsoever, but it also is probably your best healing stat, just for raw healing. So if you're struggling a lot with healing, feel free to grab some Mastery. It's a great stat for healing. It just doesn't give any damage benefit, which is why you won't see people taking it, or typically people recommending it. And then Haste is like by far the greatest stat for Holy Paladin and Mythic Plus. It's really, really, really strong. Build as much of it as you can, and then like I said, just try to get as much item level as possible. Once you start hitting like that 30% haste mark, you probably have plenty of haste and you're probably making yourself go So don't stress too much if you don't have that much haste. Just equip item level and then build haste until it feels really good for the class. So that covers everything for the Holy Paladin Mythic Plus Quick Start Guide. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.